Hello everyone and welcome to my channel and for another Canvas workspace snippet. So let's get right to it. In this Canvas workspace snippet, I'm going to give you an overview of the process overlap function in Canvas workspace. This is a powerful tool to allow you to customize your files in a variety of ways. Now, the process overlap requires that you have at least two shapes in order for it to function. And those two shapes then must overlap, as it says here, process overlap. Now, these are editing functions, so where you'll find them are either here under the Edit drop-down menu, Process Overlap, or to the Edit drop-down menu here. And if you scroll down towards the bottom of the page, you'll see the process overlap. You'll also notice that at the moment, they're grayed out, and they're not functional here either. In order to activate them, you must select the shapes. So now, as you see here, these icons have turned blue, so the process overlap is now available. The same here under the process overlap drop-down menu. You've got now the various functions, and there are four: weld, divide, remove overlap, and subtract. As you can see, I've already filled my mat here with these shapes, just to save a little bit of time. And I've also filled them. The reason I've done that is because it makes it a lot easier to keep track of where things are, especially in relation to the layers. So what object or shape is on top and what object or shape is to the back. In some cases, it doesn't matter, but in other cases, it's very important because depending on which shape is to the front or to the back, the newly created shape will change. So let's take a look at these one by one, and we'll start with weld. And I'm just going to zoom in here. Now, weld is a way that you can create new shapes from existing shapes. You can also weld objects together to create borders, for example, or you could have like a word that you've attached to the side of your card blank. There's a variety of different ways to use weld, like, for example, taking individual letters and overlapping them so that they weld together and then cut out as one word rather than the individual letters. I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Let's just look at basically what happens when you weld two shapes together. You select these two shapes, and you'll see here, this essentially is the overlapping area. Now, Canvas Workspace will remove that entirely, and it only will retain the outline. So, in this case, you'll see here, it's going to go along here, down around the outside of this heart, down here, across, and then back up. This portion of the heart is going to be removed entirely, but it's not going to be removed from the back. So if I show you what I mean, by selecting those two shapes and welding them, we create a new shape. It almost looks like a teacup. And the reason it's yellow now instead of purple is because the heart was yellow and it was the layer that was to the front. So anything that's to the front on top. That's what Canvas Workspace will use to populate the fill. The machine doesn't care what the fill is. It makes no difference what you use here, or if you don't even use a fill. But it just is an easier way to keep track of where your various shapes are. If I use the undo button and I take this heart and place it to the back, and we select them and weld them, we get the same shape again, that teacup shape, except this time it's purple because the square was to the front and that was purple. A way to weld other things to this object is, for example, let's take this word weld and we'll place it. In fact, let's take it and let's just flip it around here. As long as these two shapes overlap each other, and we can see by the bounding box where that is. And I weld them together, we get this effect. Now, what I would have done is I would have, before I welded that together, I would have made another copy just so I have something to place on top. So I would weld that, and then I could have that either go behind, or I could bring it to the front here and glue that on my piece. That's just an example of the way you could use weld. And again, it doesn't matter the order of the shapes. The same with divide. With the heart on top, I select these. You can see again here, this is the overlapping piece. When we use the shape here, or you see the shape here for the process overlap, it chops it into pieces. So it's a bit of a jigsaw effect. So when I click it, even though it looks like nothing's changed, I just click off and now click on the individual objects, you'll see that it has cut that overlap piece out of the square, but it's kept not only the piece that overlapped, but the piece that was outside. So this is sort of your jigsaw effect. So what you could do is on a card front, cut these out of different colors and have that sort of effect. And then because you have these, you could use those elsewhere in your design, or you could just delete them if you wanted to. You can use divide to create an aperture as well. So let's bring that piece in here and I'll show you what I mean. By selecting these, going to divide, it's going to punch that through. You see there? It's punched it through, created the aperture, but it's kept this piece intact. So that is a way that you can create an aperture using divide. This would be something you could use for a frame, for example. You could have a square and then a smaller square inside of it, and then what you would do is select them both, and then you could divide, and it would then create your frame. I'll just show you very quickly what I mean. Bring in a square, and we'll duplicate that. I'll align it, and now I'll divide it. And what has happened is it's kept that square for me, got that one, and then it's created a frame. And now I can let's do this one. Let's take this. Could weld this, place it inside here, like that. Weld it, and we have a completely new shape. I'll just put that back there like that. We still have this piece here. It's going to cut this aperture out, create that frame. We still have this piece that we can use perhaps later on. Right, now let's go down to the next process overlap, and this is where the order of these shapes makes a difference. In remove overlap, the shape that is going to be affected is whatever is on the bottom, the back piece. The shape that is at the front will be retained. So it's going to be taking a bite, essentially, out of this square and leaving us with the heart. So if we select these two, and we go to the process overlap icon and click, it doesn't look again as though anything has happened. You just click off somewhere, and now select that shape. You'll see the bounding box there around the heart, and you'll see the bounding box here around the square. The square has been transformed because when I move this out of the way, you'll see what's happened. And if we bring this in, you'll see that it created that same shape that we started with when we divided these pieces here. That was before we put the aperture in, of course. So removing overlap is also a way to create a new shape by taking pieces out of it. And it could be a way to make a border, for example. But I'll show you here. I'm just going to reduce this down a bit. And I'm going to place it here along this piece that we have. I need to be sure, of course, that it's on top. And I'm just going to spin that round. And now, when I remove the overlap, this section here that's overlapping is going to be cut from this piece that's at the back. This shape will be cut, and this shape will be cut. So when we select, remove the overlap, we get this effect. Keep the heart, but we have this shape left behind. So then you could maybe continue on. Something like this. And this is what you have. You can also use this as a way of creating an aperture. So I can put this heart back in here, select, and remove the overlap. And it's cut out an aperture, just like we did with divide. Now let's go over to this one, where the heart is behind. So this is the object that is going to be affected, whereas the square is going to be retained. So when we select these and remove the overlap, the square remains, and then the remaining portion of the heart is this. Now, if you were to put that behind and select both of them, everything behind this square is now gone because it is beyond the bounds of that piece that was placed behind it. So I'm just going to bring back that for us. The last one that we're going to look at is subtract. This can be used very much like divide, except in this case, it's going to dispose of the shape that's been punched through. So let's look at this one, where the heart is at the front and the square is at the back. We subtract it, and it's created our shape. Remember, that is the same shape that we started with there. So we've created that in different ways. We've created it by dividing, we've created it by removing the overlap, and we've also been able to do it with subtract, except in this case, it's completely taken the heart off of the screen, so it's not available to us anymore. We can also, let's just duplicate this one. Subtract that. Now we have an aperture, like we did with divide. And we have this new shape here, and the hearts have disappeared from the screen. Let's take a look at the last one, and this is where the square is to the front. Select both of these shapes, click subtract, and now it's removed the object that was at the front and only kept the object at the back. And if you were to put that object behind, select both, and everything disappears because it is then this heart is smaller than that square. So those are the 4 different types of overlap: weld, divide, remove overlap, and subtract. So in this last bit of the video, I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration of how I've used these 4 different functions to create a design. Now, they are speeded up, so if you want to watch it slower, you're going to have to use your speed function in YouTube. You can slow it down if you want to watch it how I made it step by step. But it's just a way just to demonstrate how I use the various overlap functions to create a design. And many of my videos also use these 4 functions. Maybe not all of them, but at least the majority of them. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. And if you have a question or if I've not been very clear on anything, please let me know. And I'll see you again for the next snippet. Bye for now.